I always thought Sword and Shield were a pair of rushed, uninspired, heavily flawed games that delivered a shallow Pokemon experience as a result. And I've spent a good long while detailing how and why that's the case. However, today I brought with me many agents of facts and logic that will demonstrate for us all how I was wrong about Pokemon Sword and Shield. Some classic examples used against those who have the wrong opinion about a game before it's released is to gently remind them of that fact. It's totally cool if you praise the game before release though, because that's the correct opinion to have, of course. Things become a lot more challenging once the game finally does come out, seeing as how you can no longer deflect criticism by referring to the release date or reciting the disclaimer found at the bottom of every pre-release trailer. These are the same types of people that will complain about others regurgitating the same crap over and over, but it's only okay when they do it. This includes post-release trailers as well, by the way. Yeah, even after Sword and Shield came out, the trailer still had that same disclaimer, despite game footage being very final. Which illustrates how redundant it truly is, but it sure comes in handy when your goal is to silence any dissent. The whole point of criticism in the first place is to elicit change, so whether game footage is final or not is irrelevant. Someone thought of the most brilliant no-win scenario for those who insist on having the wrong opinion well after the game's official release. Then don't complain about the game. No one forced you to buy either. It's true that no one forced anyone to buy anything. Not only can you not be critical about the game before it drops because it's not out yet, you must also accept that it's perfect even after playing it. This is some impeccable 4D chess maneuvering that really puts critics in an untenable position. Not everyone is big-brained enough to invoke such an ingenious, impregnable defense. Others are much more charitable, so let's see what they have to say. Joe Merrick, the webmaster of Cerebi who was featured earlier, shared some of the same desires as myself once upon a time, one of which being a more accurate representation of Pokemon scale in battle. Here Joe could be seen expressing his excitement at the prospect of Gen 8 doing Pokemon scale justice. This, however, never came to be. Not only was Hoopa Unbound cut from Sword and Shield, but Pokemon scale actually regressed from what was seen in Let's Go. Let's see what Joe had to say about this. Okay, imagine this then. Cutiefly, one of the smallest Pokemon, versus Hoopa Unbound and Wailord. It just wouldn't work. Maybe if it was TV only, but Switch is still a handheld with a relatively small screen. Interesting. So he went from anticipating proper scale in Gen 8 to proclaiming it wouldn't even be possible a year later. Huh. If there's a really big Pokemon on the field, it makes it hard to see some of the smaller ones. I guess I can see where he's coming from. It's a shame Sword and Shield doesn't have some kind of dynamic camera that would circumvent that issue entirely, so shrinking the larger Pokemon in order to see the smaller ones makes total sense. This small Switch screen also makes large models an impossibility. Dynamax, of course, being the exception, because, people, for God's sakes. It's just a tree. I mean, he's not wrong. It is in fact a tree. Back to Merrick real quick. He didn't stop there and wanted to further enlighten us on why he was right and everyone else was wrong. I know a lot of people are ragging on Wingull, but let me just point out that Wingull isn't meant to flap its wings in flight. All through the anime and various media, it shows Wingull as seldom flapping its wings, typically only doing it to take off. He then cites the Pokédex as his irrefutable proof, because we all know how much of a reputable and credible source the Pokédex is. Even then, the sources provided by Merrick himself reference updrafts created from the sea, which is a lot more plausible than updrafts generated from patches of grass. One entry states that Wingull skates across the sky, which typically implies being high up in the air, but technically the sky refers to anything above the surface of the earth, so it checks out. Maybe you should just go outside and stop criticizing a children's game. I took this person's advice, and after weeks of sheltering myself from I went outside, took a deep breath, and suddenly, Sword and Shield became a better game. I couldn't believe it. It was a miracle. I was initially confused about demanding the cessation of my criticism of a children's game. What did children have to do with anything, I wondered. So I did some digging and came across this. Why are you expecting a lot for a kid's game? It seems that if a product is perceived to be for children, expectations of the quality of said product should be lowered, and any criticism halted immediately. It turns out children, the most impressionable of our species, aren't worth the time or effort to create exceptional products for. Kids are dumb, right? So the media they consume should reflect that. It's wrong to consider children as deserving of quality. Kids deserve less. From that point of view, these types of comments make a lot more sense. Which reminds me, I recently came across yet another post that featured Masuda, the director of Pokemon Let's Go, explaining why newer Pokemon games were made easier. The reason for this, as usual, is because everyone is very busy nowadays with their free mobile phone games and don't have the time to dedicate to Pokemon anymore. So entire Pokemon games are made easier as a result, completely disregarding those who may want more of a challenge. If only there was some way to appease everyone. There was this really cool, revolutionary feature that solved this exact problem back in 1977, over 40 years ago, on the Atari 2600 called difficulty options. Get this, instead of shaping the game around any one single difficulty, the developers instead gave the player the choice to select what they preferred, granting the player agency by allowing them to tailor their experience to their liking. I was confused at first why Pokemon games, like Sword and Shield, couldn't incorporate this ancient technology, even though they had in the past as seen in Black 2 White 2, until now. Imagine being a kid who can barely read, and you get a Pokemon game that asks you about difficulty and shows you a slider. As we recently established, kids are dumb and should be treated as such. They can't be trusted to do anything right. You can never give them the benefit of the doubt by putting any faith in their mental capabilities. Children can't handle not being told what to do or where to go at all times. Their hand must be held as tight as possible, otherwise they might get lost and confused, which would require critical thinking, and we can't have any of that. Children couldn't possibly want to be challenged or respected for their own merits, and they certainly couldn't withstand the cold, dark reality of being faced with the concept of failure. They must be coddled and shielded from anything that could be construed as harmful or too difficult. Therefore, presenting the player with menu options in a video game based around menu options is simply too much for children to bear. Their feeble minds wouldn't be able to comprehend the gravity of their own decisions. They need someone to make that decision for them. People keep forgetting how much data is necessary on the main series of games. The game people want for Pokemon can never be on console because it would never fit a cartridge. Sword and Shield maxing out the cartridge would be a big problem for sure. I could have sworn the Switch cartridge went up to around 32 gigabytes. Even with DLC, Sword and Shield wouldn't even take up half of that. But perhaps I'm misremembering. Despite having an additional 20 gigabytes of space to work with, the ideal Pokemon game could never be realized because people asking for the bare minimum just have their expectations up way too high. Another clever tactic at deflecting criticism is to dismiss it as hate. For example, criticism is definitely a form of hate. So if a coach criticizes your form in a sport, or a friend criticizes your essay when proofreading it, they're not doing it because they want to help you be the best you can be and for you to succeed. It's because they hate you. Makes sense. Here's a guy that is believed to be Verlisify's burner account. Judging from the abundance of very smart things he has to say, I wouldn't be surprised. You are hating on a game because it is popular and you can clickbait views. Doodlebob is employing the aforementioned tactic used to deflect criticism by conflating it with senseless hate, but this time gave a reason for the hate, which lends more credibility to his argument. If a product is popular and you are critical of that product, it can't possibly have anything to do with its quality, so it's safe to assume you hate it instead. Accusing a video of clickbait is a surefire way to invalidate and dismiss the contents from within. Just stop playing if you hate it so much. Don't ruin other people's fun. Guilt-tripping people into compliance via emotional manipulation is some next-level mind games. If wrongthink is silenced, the game becomes better and the fun can proceed unopposed. I'm not sure why someone would click on a video that could jeopardize their fun in the first place, but you're the one with the wrong opinion, so it's your fault. Congrats on making clickbait videos nitpicking flaws from Gen 8 even though Game Freak was still experimenting with 3D. Generalizing criticism you don't like as nitpicks is an excellent way at reducing the validity of the criticism, which gives you the opportunity to conveniently hand-wave it all away. Well played. Those who rely on characterizing everything they don't like as nitpicks are admitting to the existence of flaws, but consider them flaws not worthy of consideration. When a potential employer nitpicks by pointing out a minor spelling mistake in your resume, they too should just ignore it and carry on, seeing as how it's not really a big deal anyways. Game Freak has been experimenting with 3D ever since Diamond and Pearl on the DS over 15 years ago. I think it's safe to assume they know what they're doing by now, but I could be mistaken. Damn, the West really hates Hop, huh? I mean, I feel as if they exaggerate the things that annoyed them when it comes to him. He's a bad character because I felt sorry for defeating him. Maybe that's sort of the point? I always thought the point of a rivalry was to encourage a competitive spirit. Rivals are supposed to push each other. This in turn makes both parties stronger while also making victory that much more satisfying. But it turns out the point of a rival is to make your victories feel hollow and wrong. Respect replaced in favor of pity. This, at first glance, seems entirely antithetical to the typical role of a rival, but Sword and Shield aren't your typical games. They're a profound experience, shattering preconceived notions and conventions in the attempt to subvert expectations. Hop doesn't make you feel how a rival should, but that's the point, you see? So he's definitely a well-written character and deserves to be acknowledged as such. This video is just straight up dumb, XD. Engaging with any points brought up is a waste of time. Insulting a critique video is an epic own and has the magical ability to nullify any and all criticism. What's better than insulting the video? Insulting its creator, of course. Once Sword and Shield comes out, everyone who was outraged about it will have it and enjoy playing it. Even you will enjoy the game and then your channel will die because you're not feeding the what they want as their leader. Good riddance to you. Conduct like this really shows how much of a bigger person you are while simultaneously refuting any arguments brought forth. A 2-for-1 deal. Character assassination allows you to circumvent any arguments presented entirely. Instead of discrediting the criticism, you can go directly to the source by ascribing questionable motivations to your opposition. This has the effect of making anything they say wrong by default. There's a campaign driven by you to make money. Before you accuse others of being paid for their views, make sure the day before you create a heartfelt post detailing how much of a victim you are, while reminding others to be better by not accusing others of being paid for their views. This establishes a hypocritical rules for thee but not for me dynamic, granting incredible authority as it's only okay when you do it, while allowing you to chastise others for doing the same, making yourself seem like the better person to maintain your moral high ground. Make sure to sprinkle in some projection at the end as well to demonstrate to everyone your remarkable ability at dismantling wrong opinions. At last, we have arrived at the final boss, a 9,000 IQ play that demolishes anything that gets in its way.
Pokemon Sword and Shield are heavily flawed. Here are 50+ videos detailing exactly how and why that is the case.
20 million sales and counting.
Yo, you guys, what's up? What did you think of those highly compelling arguments? I just wanted to thank you all for the overwhelming love and support. When I first uploaded my Game Freak is Lazy video, I didn't really think anything of it. You know, it just mostly came from a place of largely disappointment and frustration. And so it was really cool to see that resonate with a lot of you guys. I'll be streaming right after this, so if you want to chat and chill, feel free to drop by. I'll be playing Pokemon Unbound, the fan game. So yeah, thanks so much for watching.